like the Lord our God, the one throned on high that looks down on the heavens and earth. It's like the Lord our God, let his name be praised both now and forevermore. From the rising of the sun till the going down, the name of the Lord shall be praised. It's like the Lord our God comforts all who mourn and provides those who grieve in Zion. It's like the Lord our God will bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes. From the rising of the sun until the going down, the name of the Lord shall be praised. A glorious crown, Lord Almighty will be a beautiful wreath for the remnant of his people. It's like the Lord our God, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise. It's like the Lord our God, he raises the poor from the dust, lifts the needy from the ashes. From the rising of the sun until the going down, the name of the Lord shall be praised. The glorious crown, Lord Almighty will be a beautiful wreath for the remnant of his people. Your eyes will see, your eyes will see. The land of stretches of fire. A planting of the Lord, splendor. They will become oaks of righteousness. It's like the Lord our God, the one enthroned on high that looks down on the heavens and earth. It's like the Lord our God, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise. It's like the Lord our God, the one enthroned on high that looks down on the heavens and earth. On the heavens and earth. Praise the Lord.
Welcome to Discerning Truths with Bill Donahue. So, thank you for joining me for today. This is once again a pre-recorded program because off hunting, hopefully doing well. And we are in Revelation chapter 13. I broke it into two pieces so that I could handle it in an hour because I couldn't do the chapter justice if I tried to break it all off and do the whole chapter in an hour. So we get there, and then before we get on to the study, I always try to take care of business, right? So as has been the case for the last couple months, I have shifted my address to Kauai. That's a good mailbox for me over there. I've got a foot in each state going back and forth until I can get there permanently. And then emails, because I'm not going to have time to talk to the chat to answer your questions during this program. Write your emails down. Send them off to me, Bill at Discerning Truths. I may not be able to respond to them until I get back, but I will respond to your email. And then anything you have for the Prophet Club Clowns, or the Prophet Club, goes to the Prophet Club Clowns at Gmail. We're not the clowns, okay? Prophet Club Clowns at gmail.com. And then if you're new to my studies, or you just came over from Facebook because I've stopped broadcasting over there, or I am stopping, then all my streams are up on Cloud Hub, back from the earliest day, and you can go back and see how we got here, because I spent a year laying the groundwork to study Revelation. And then when you see slides up like this slide or the next slide, any of the slides with scripture verses or quotes, I create PDFs of them and I stick them on the Discerning Truths group on Telegram, and they're for you to be able to go back and see, look up the references yourself and see what you think. Was I telling you the truth? When I disagree with some scholars, who's right? On Monday and Wednesdays, I teach the book of Revelation until we finish. And then on Friday, I usually try to do something different. And then on Tuesday, I'm typically on with Neo as a guest, but we haven't been able to connect over the last few weeks, and it'll probably next week is my first hopeful day back on Neo's program. But she's always good to listen to. I enjoy Neo. Started out as a fan before I became a guest, and I always promote my friend Michael Beatty, Megalifornia, to many of you, singer, songwriter extraordinaire, Twitter monster before they banned him from Twitter. Was out there with a huge following on Twitter, and now God has added to that gift the ability to teach, and he is really a gifted teacher. He comes on at 5:30 a.m. Monday to Friday, little worship, Proverbs, and then he's teaching right now. He's in Luke, and it's been an interesting study. I mean, I learned stuff in Luke, which was just, I love that. And then on Wednesdays at 1 p.m., when this stream ends, he comes on with Bended Knee. Well, assuming I end on time. He comes on at 1 o'clock, whether or not I'm over or, however that works out. And then we've done a number of prophet clubs together. I just haven't had the timing in my schedule to do them recently, so that has put a damper on them. And with that, I want to get to our study, and like I said, we are in the book of Revelation, sometimes called the Apocalypse of John, chapter 13, and we're coming up to the second beast, right? So it's been my habit since about halfway through Isaiah. I started pulling out Matthew Henry's introductory notes to his commentary, because I like the way Matthew Henry breaks down the chapters. We have differences of opinion on interpretation, but the way he lays out the chapters is very helpful. And he writes, "We have in this chapter a further discovery and description of the church's enemies, not other enemies that are mentioned before, but described after another manner, that the methods of their enmity may be more fully appear. They are represented by the two beasts. The first you have an account of in verse 1 to 10, and that's what we did in episode 1. And the second in verses 11 and following. And by the first, some understand that the Roman, pagan Rome, the government, and by the second, the Roman papal, the papal power in Rome. And others understand Rome papal to be represented by both these beasts. And the first is its secular power, and the second, it's ecclesiastical. Now, I explained last session, and I explained before, Matthew Henry's interpretive grid to the book of Revelation is from historicism. It was the prevalent interpretive grid used by the reformers. Matthew Henry lived shortly after the Reformation. He's following standard Reformation interpretation of the book of Revelation. And so you got to understand, what he's saying is not inconsistent for the time he lives in. It's like if you were a Christian evangelical in America in 1970s or 80s, you're going to teach 90% of the people you're going to hear from taught dispensational premillennialism as their point of view. It's a futurist position, and so knowing what somebody's presuppositions are and their interpretive grid helps you be able to pick out the gold that they offer and leave the dross behind, the worthless stuff. Okay. So in our last study, we looked at the first beast that rose from the sea like the dragon, and that's, you see it in Revelation 12:3. The beast had 7 heads and 10 horns, representing world kingdoms, which culminate in the beast as the 7th, which had not yet come in John's day, and you see that in Revelation 17:10. This is not a matter of conjecture. For the same beast with 7 heads is ridden upon by the harlot, and the mother of harlots and abominations in the earth, and you see that in Revelation 17:3. We are told that the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and 7 kings. Revelation 17:9-10. And the head of the beast receives a deadly wound, which is healed. Revelation 13:3. This revived head is considered the 8th and is of the 7 and is going into perdition. Revelation 17:11. The terminology describing the beast indicates that he is both a kingdom and represented by his leader, right? The king. In Daniel, that king might be a president, might be a whatever the thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be king. It's the leader of that nation. In Daniel's night vision, he sees 4 beasts, which, when taken together, have 7 heads. Okay? So this is what it's telling you, is this 7th beast is a culmination, or the 8th beast is a culmination of all the previous 7, right? And that from Daniel's perspective, it's a culmination of his 4 beasts, which was represented there. So this section, I started at verse 11, and it says, "Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all authority of the first beast and its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed." Now, this is the first 2 verses of this discussion of this beast. First thing I want you to notice is we have seen that the sea is symbolic of the Gentile nations. We saw it in Isaiah. We saw it in other places. We saw it earlier in the book of Revelation. The land is symbolic of Israel. This beast is not part of the true Israel, right? Jesus and the faithful remnant are the true Israel, but rather is an imitation, almost a parody of Jesus, and you're going to see this. It has the appearance of a lamb, but the words it speaks come out right from the dragon, much like many of the false prophets in history, or today, I might add, right? So the question is this just the apostate church worshiping political power, or will the first beast be realized in a singular political leader and the apostate church be realized in a singular false prophet at the end of times? On that question, the scholars disagree. So you understand, from here on out, this is going to kind of drive their interpretive agendas. Preterists see the first beast as Nero and the second beast as anthropomorphic. Okay? It's kind of interesting the way to look at it. One we're going to take quasi-literal, and the other one's an anthropomorphism. Like I said, for it to be Nero, the book of Revelation has to be written before 70 AD, probably before 66 AD. And so that's the problem for the preterist point of view. Other than the dating, if there was strong evidence for the book of Revelation being written in the 60s, you'd see a lot more preterist leanings coming out of me, because their interpretation is consistent. It's the most consistent of any of these that I'm going to discuss, right? But it has a fatal flaw in there that for it to be prophecy, this book has to be dated way earlier than the evidence suggests. Now, historicists and idealists see both beasts as anthropomorphisms, although many Reformation era historicists identified Pope Leo X as the Antichrist, the first beast, and the papacy in general as the second beast. For most futurists, while there have been many Antichrist and false prophets, they see these as types and foreshadows of the two actual people who will arise on the scene near the end of days. So futurists take a position that even though there's an anthropomorphic meaning in a lot of these bases, that it's based in actual people coming forward, right? And that's not just dispensational. Most futurists take that position. Okay, there's some debate whether the mortal wound refers to a literal wound on a person or whether it describes the loss of power that a celestial being empowering one of those original kingdoms suffered. What that would mean is that, typically when you rise to power as an empire and then you get crumbled or conquered or whatever falls apart, those empires don't generally come back. But if you hold a position that behind these evil empires are celestial beings, principalities and powers, is what Paul talks about in Ephesians, okay? The Benai Elohim, the sons of God, if you, the watchers in the book of Enoch, the Ankala in the Ankala story, that these beings were set up by God as subordinates to look over the nations, and they disobeyed and sought worship, and they got in a lot of trouble. Some of them disobeyed and did some pretty nasty stuff in Genesis 6. But the general thing is that they were seeking worship for themselves. And then you see that they fall. Like, even in the Daniel story, you had the Medo-Persian Empire that came up and took care of Babylon, and then it says, but whoa, here comes the Prince of Grecia, and he's going to take them out, right? So even among themselves, they fight for power and argue for power. So there's a question with the scholars whether this mortal wound is a metaphor for the loss of that power, the conquering, and to describe a nation that collapsed and then will come back. And that position has a lot of credibility and a lot of textual support. So it's not. And then the next thing I highlighted here for you in those same two verses, 11 and 12, is it had two horns like a lamb. And the mention of horns in conjunction with a lamb points to the vision of the throne room prior to the opening of the first seal, where John saw a lamb as though it had been saying, having 7 horns and 7 eyes. That's not, yes, 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God and sent out on earth. That's from Revelation 5:6. Horns frequently symbolize power. The lamb has 7, the number of completeness. So the lamb has complete power. The beast only has 2 horns, the number of witness, because his ultimate purpose is to be a witness for the first beast, right? The false prophet or false Christ are cheap imitations of true prophets and the true Christ. The power and authority Jesus is described as having in this book are complete. The power and authority are limited and temporary for the false ones, right? They are simply being allowed to exist as instruments of God's judgment. And they were allowed to let their evil complete, and they're going to be judged for it. Jesus speaks for God while they speak for the dragon. And the dragon's a metaphor, and we're going to see this for the devil, right? The dragon, the chaos monster, the Leviathan, the 7-headed sea monster. This imagery has been used all through the Bible as an image of evil personified. Okay, so before I put up the PDFs, I'm going to go back and try to catch these couple spelling errors. I proofread these right before we went on the air, and I still miss them. Now, I quote from Beale, G.K. Beale, a lot in this study. I mean, extensively quote from him. And I'll tell you that he's a mixture. He doesn't fit in one camp easily. He's got a little historicist in him and a little bit idealist and then some futurist. And he's got a little foot in all. And since I have a foot in all four camps, right? I see some truth in the preterist and the historicist, idealist, and futurist camps. I take dispensational futurist to task the most often only because it's the most popular today. And I don't have a ton of preterists running out here that I got to combat. I'm dealing with people that are following an interpretive grid that I think is fatally flawed. Okay? So Beale argues that the first and second beast are different aspects of the same evil ruler. I think he downplays too much the fact that one beast comes out of the sea and the other one comes out of the earth. That symbolism is all true to the Old Testament, with the sea being Gentile and the earth being Israel. I think this is clearly portraying two distinct people, with one being a Gentile, Antichrist, but the false prophet being Jewish. And then verses 11 to 17, and this is going to be, I'm quoting now, concerns the same situation of verses 1 to 8, but from the perspective of the state's ally in the second beast, as in verse 1. This vision also begins with the image of an ascending beast, which is a collective recollection of the beast of Daniel 7, especially 7:17. And remember this, you had a beast like a lion, and one like a leopard, and one like a bear in Daniel. And all those images come out in these beasts, right? And that's what he means, is that it's a recollection of those beasts. And our four kings who will rise from the earth, as is generally accepted, this image is also a parody of the resurrected Messianic Lamb. And that's what I talked about. It's like a joke, a cheap knockoff for Jesus. And you see this in Revelation 5:6, and has an ironic relation with it. It too is the lamb with horns, but why 2 horns instead of 7 horns of the Messianic Lamb in chapter 5? Perhaps one reason is to mimic the 2 witnesses of the lampstands, and the 2 witnesses, 2 lampstands, and 2 olive trees of chapter 11, verses 3 and 4. Yet the 2 horns also reflect an evil ruler in Daniel 8, just as the first beast described with attributes from the beast of Daniel 7, so the description of the second beast as having 2 horns like a lamb is taken from Daniel 8:3. A ram which had 2 horns, similarly the opposing figure in Daniel 7:7 also had 10 horns. What Beale's pointing out here is John's been tracking through Daniel here pretty regularly. He hits Isaiah, he hits Ezekiel and all that, but he's tracking with Daniel. He's pulling imagery out of Daniel on a wholesale level. And he wants you to see that the beasts he's talking about are the same ones that Daniel was talking about. Beale continues, like the first beast, this beast speaks with the full authority of the devil. He was speaking as a dragon. The beast is later called a false prophet in Revelation 16, 13, 19, 20, and 20:10, suggesting that its role is primarily religious. A true prophet leads people to worship God, the one true God, but the false prophet leads them to worship the state and by extension the devil. False prophets and teachers have already infiltrated the churches. You see that in Revelation 2:2 and 2:6 and 14 and 15 and 20 and 24, even as Jesus prophesied in Matthew 7:15 and 24:5 and 11, and Paul warned in Acts 20, 28 and 29. This warning of these false prophets that were coming in the latter days is all through the New Testament. What it's being here is done. Whether the false prophet's a personification of a number of prophets or a singular person, I favor the singular, but I think the meaning works either way. And it's people that come into the church and are teaching you to follow stuff that is not biblical. And in this case, when you can see from the text, he's going to teach you to bow to the state. Okay? And that's going to hit pretty close to home for many of us that lived through the last couple of years, right? So what you have here is an image of a wolf in lamb's clothing, suggested a traitor within the fold of the church. Though the beast professes to represent the truth and appears harmless as a lamb, the inner satanic nature is revealed through his speaking and the authority of the dragon. He is speaking as a dragon reflects alluring, deceptive speech of Satan, the dragon which led to the sin of Adam and Eve, cross-reference Revelation 12:9. Therefore, this imagery and background suggests deception with the covenant community itself. Whereas the first beast speaks loudly and defiantly against God, the second beast makes the first beast's claims sound plausible and persuasive. False teachers within the church are encouraging compromise with the culture's idolatrous institutions. I want you to hear this from Beal, because I couldn't have said it better. We have false apostles, false prophets, false teachers running around claiming to be Christian, and I'm not going to question their salvation. I'm just telling you, judge them by their words, right, and their fruit. And they're teaching false doctrine, and they're leading people astray. When we did the parables, the looks at the parables, and we saw that the mustard bush grows into a giant tree that fills the whole earth. So even the birds of the air can nest in its branches. And then we looked at the other parable and saw that the birds of the air were ministers of Satan. So it's painting a picture of the church where even ministers of Satan can sit in its branches. And that church is here in Revelation 13. That church did not get raptured in Revelation 4:1. In fact, the saints are here in Revelation 13. The saints were here in Revelation 12. So I'm sorry. I want to be wrong on this issue, but the Bible is clear. It is so clear on this subject, it's hard to believe people hold to a different position. Okay? Now, verses 13 and 14 say, it, means the beast, performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth and in front of people, and by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast who was wounded by the sword and is yet lives. Okay? And that's why you get people taking a position that this is a literal head wound that's going to happen. I don't think it's necessarily literal, but it could be. It could be both. And that's why we did the quadrian, that the scripture can have multiple meanings. It can have an allegorical meaning about that refers to the beast behind the kingdom, and still have a literal application with a leader that actually has a head wound. Okay? Now, the religious character of the second beast becomes clearer here. First, it is said that he performs great signs that makes him a satanic counterfeit to the true prophet Moses, who also performed signs in Exodus 4:17, 30, and 10:2. Now, I want to stop here. If you remember, Moses did miracles. He turned a staff into a snake, and then what did the magicians for Pharaoh do? Dropped their staffs, and they became snakes too. And they were all going, we can do that. And then Moses, the snake, ate their snakes. And they went, well, we can't do that, right? And then Moses, they were able to do what we would consider miracles by supernatural satanic power. And you have lying signs and wonders talked about in the New Testament. And that's what's going on here. I don't think this is a magician's trick. I don't think it's sleight of hand. I think they're actually doing supernatural stuff. And that's going to get people to follow them, because if you look at what the church does today, they chase around whoever has the latest attraction. And if you're calling fire down from heaven, you're going to have all these streamers on the internet going, oh, did you see, Johnny Downlow, and he called fire down from heaven, and you got this going on, and they'll be spreading it. And these people are going to profess to be Christians. Like I said, I'm not claiming I'm not questioning their salvation. I'm just saying they are absolutely deceived and doing false teaching. Right? Now, the prophet Elijah, like Moses, also did these miracles, right? If you remember Elijah, that was one of the favorite stories in the Bible, where he's teasing the prophets of Baal, and all day, like, scream louder, maybe your God's off on a journey. I love the English translations; they try to help you out. It's basically, maybe your God's in the toilet, right? That he's off taking a dump, and so he harasses them all day, and then he ends up pouring water on his sacrifice, and then God takes the sacrifice, laps up all the water. It's a great scene on Mount Carmel. And the allusion to Moses and Elijah cannot be accidental, given their similar allusions to them in regard to the two witnesses, Revelation 11, 3-12. Now, that has led some people to think that Moses and Elijah are going to come back in human form and actually show up here. I don't take that position. And they go, well, Elijah didn't die. Well, Moses sure did, right? So then they go, well, maybe it's Elijah and Enoch as another representative of Moses. Well, they would have said Enoch and not Moses, right? It's the law and prophets that's being here as your two witnesses. And who taken together represent the church. Now, this is, like I said, this is Beale's interpretive thing. You're going to see this coming on. When it's talking about the believers, he's going to call them the church. I would say that the believers, Israel, the true Israel, includes the believing remnant of Israel and those Gentiles who were grafted in. We're the wild olive branches. We are grafted in. And we're grafted in because, as Isaiah explained, the true Israel, the faithful servant, is Jesus. And the fact that we're in Jesus makes us in Israel. But you don't want to, I think people that do what's called replacement theology and try to push Israel out of the way so that the church can be here, confuse that. We're added into them. We don't knock them out of the way. But not everybody who says is born of Abraham is a Jew, and Jesus tells you that. Right? Now, like you said, those two witnesses, according to Beale, portray are taken together to represent the church in Luke 9:4 and 11:5. Revelation 11:5 portrays fire proceeding out of the mouth of the two witnesses. There, the fire indicates speaking God's word that convicts a judge. Sinners, also the fire consuming the saints and enemies, you're going to see in Revelation 20, verse 9b. Okay, so I'm going to stop again. You notice how we just went from a kind of literal interpretation to a very allegorical interpretation, and I'm arguing against this. I think Beale wrote a great book. This is the best commentary I've ever seen on Revelation. I mean, this full one, the big one, at 1,300 pages, is the best. I'm using the shorter commentary right now that's 800 and something pages. But I think Beale did a great job. But even I watch him, and it's like, well, this passage fits my interpretive grid if I take it literally. And this one fits my interpretive grid if I take it allegorically and do that. I prefer Beale when he's taken Old Testament passages, finding those meanings, and then defending it, because he does that as good as or better than anybody. And that's the interpretive methodology we're using. We're saying John is pulling from the Old Testament, heavily Daniel, but a lot of other books in the Old Testament. He's pulling symbolism out. And if you can figure out what that symbolism meant in its original context, you can know what it means in his context, because he's using it as like a shorthand way to tell you what's going on. Therefore, the fire represents the speaking of God's true word, which judges sinners And here the beast poses as a spokesman for truth, but a false prophet and a false teacher. This is part of what Christ prophesied in Matthew 24:24. False Christs and false prophets will arise and show you great signs and wonders, and that so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. And so he gives you a bunch of cross references in 2 Thessalonians and Matthew, and I agree with Beale on that interpretation. It was just like he went sideways for me for a second, right? Now I highlighted in 13 and 14. It says, "It deceives those who dwell on the earth," because you need to catch this. We need to understand that those who dwell on the earth does not include all of mankind. We all live on the earth, but we don't all dwell on the earth. The phrase "those who dwell on the earth" takes on a soteriological or eschatological thing. Soteriology is the doctrine of salvation, right? Eschatology is the end of the doctrine of last things, meaning in the book of Revelation, for it denotes the unsaved at the time of the end, okay? Worshipping the beast who are steadfastly continuing their rejection of God. So those who dwell on the earth are identifying themselves as being followers of the devil. They are rejecting God overtly. This doesn't happen by accident. This isn't they were tricked into it. This is an overt, conscious rejection of God, and they dwell on the earth. Now 2 Thessalonians 2:9-12 says, "The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all the power and false signs and wonders, and with all the wicked deceptions for those who are perishing." See, it's the people who dwell on the earth are perishing because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false, in order that they all may be condemned who do not believe the truth, but had the pleasure in unrighteousness. So Paul explains what John is saying here without Paul and John actually having a conversation, or without Paul having read what John wrote, because I don't think it's written yet. But he, in his letter to Thessalonians, is talking about the same subject and offers us enough detail that we can see what John's saying. Now here's the quote that they got from Jesus earlier. "For false Christ and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect." Well, if the elect aren't here on this planet when this happens, how could they possibly do it? And people are arguing, well, it's not possible because the elect are in heaven. I'm saying it's not possible because God promises a perseverance of the saints. Okay? Now, why are the two beasts described with so many traits borrowed from those of the Old Testament prophets and of God, and in terms of striking similar to the descriptions of God, the Lamb, and the Christians elsewhere in the Apocalypse? This is Beale's question, and he comes right to the main point here. The reason is that they attempt to validate their divine authority in a similar manner to true prophets. And he went through that description in his discussion of 2 Corinthians 11:13-15. This is explicitly expressed by the phrase, "and he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which were given to him to perform in the presence of the beast." True prophets receive their inspiration and their commission as they stand before the presence of the Lord, Revelation 11:4. Likewise, the false prophet receives his inspiration and commission as he acts in the presence of the beast. God's true agents, by the power of the Spirit, perform signs and bring glory to God, whereas the demonic signs convince the earth dwellers of the authority not of God, but of the beast. Okay? So in here, this first beast was political. The second beast is a religious type leader who is getting you to worship the first leader. You're going to worship political power. Not you are. You are not going to do that. Hopefully nobody listening to me is going to do that. But the people that dwell on the earth are going to worship political power. I said, can we recognize the false prophets of our day? Many prophesying believers cannot. So it is no surprise that the signs and wonders of the false prophet will deceive so many. The church is being conditioned now to accept false prophets who speak the words of the dragon and to accept false signs and wonders without question. It's like, I talked about leaving your brain at the door coming into some of these churches, that there's critical thinking skills are horribly in out of style at this point, right? And then I copied Revelation 13, 15 to 18, and then the first thing I highlighted in yellow is allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, because I want to discuss that more. But it says, and it was allowed, meaning the second beast, was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, first beast, right? So that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is, the name of the beast or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. It is let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is of a man, and his number is 666. Some manuscripts it's 616, but let's just deal with that either way, because it doesn't matter whether you do 616 or 666. There are people that will play with the numbers, pick a language, Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Hebrew, take the letters that add up to 666, and then get the person they wanted to come up with anyway. They'll take alternate spellings of a person's name. It really is sad what is done to try to identify a person based on this number. Now, many preterists, historicists, and idealists, and some futurists do not take this passage literally. Here's a quote offering an allegorical interpretation, and this is from Steve Gregg, who wrote the 4 Views of Parallel Commentary. The making of the image of the beast, verse 14, or the image of the beast, verse 15, and the giving breath to the image and the requirement that all men worship it are difficult features to correlate with any action known to have occurred in Israel in the first century. This needs not be taken literally, however, and can simply refer to a Jew general homage of Roman authority. Now, here's the funny is, I actually think Steve Gregg has the right answer here, that it's not necessarily literal, because why would you take that literal when the rest of this passage you're absolutely not going to take literally, right? And but I don't think most Christians take the supernatural as seriously as the Bible does. We seem to pick and choose where we will allow supernatural events or beings to be described. I see no objection to some false miracle occurring here, just as Pharaoh's magicians were able to imitate many of Moses' miracles. I don't put it past the devil to be allowed by God to be able to breathe life into some inanimate statue and let it speak and do things. I don't think that's beyond the pale of what's in Scripture, because there's so many other supernatural events in Scripture. So I don't think, just because I see Steve Gregg's point that it's not necessarily literal, it doesn't mean that it isn't also literal, right? The demand that everyone, small and great and rich and poor, and free men and slaves, receive the mark on the right hand and their forehead could be an allusion to an ancient practice of branding or tattooing disobedient slaves, soldiers, and loyal devotees to gods of various religions. If the association with the slaves is in mind, then the beast worshippers are seen as his property. Okay, now I'm going to stop here. This is going to be Beale. But if you remember back with the 144,000 being sealed, that was to identify them as being God's property. And I'm telling you this, the devil is doing like a parody on that. He's flipping it around. So I think Beale's directly on the right track here. If soldiers or religious devotees are in view, the worshippers are seen as the beast's faithful followers. Here, the mark is clearly figurative for the way in which the state keeps check on whether people are submitting to their compulsory idol worship. Those who are not submitting to receiving the mark are unable to buy or sell. This is a reference back to Revelation 2:9 and 5 and 6, where economic measures are directed against Christians. Remember those Christians that aren't here? Yeah, well, they got punished for not worshiping the beast. The mark was used by an emperor's seal on business contracts and for the impress of the Roman ruler's head on coins. This is the background that's in mind. Then it enforces the metaphorical idea that of the mark in Revelation 13 alludes to the state's political and economic stamp of approval, given only to those who go along with the religious demands. The mark on their forehead, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name, is a parody of the opposite of the seal in Revelation 7:3-8, which is the 144,000, right? And written on the foreheads of true believers. Revelation 14:1 also identifies that. So likewise, Revelation 22:4 and 3:12, since the seal or name of the true believer is invisible, so is the mark of the unbeliever. That the two are parallel spiritual nature and intended to be compared is evident from the immediately following mention of the names of God and Christ written on the foreheads of the saints. 14:1. So Beale has just made an argument for an allegorical interpretation of this passage, and I think his argument has some strong credibility. Give me a second, I gotta choke. All right, my throat was talking too much, I guess, reading too much. Now this is where the rubber's going to hit the road, because during COVID-19 outbreak, the world just had a taste of just how easy it is for government to prevent you from buying, selling, conducting any business, going to work, travel, and even gathering at your places of worship. It prevented people from being with their loved ones as they died, no matter what the cause was. You know, I mean, they could say they were protecting you if they died from COVID. They didn't want you exposed, but they could be dying from old age or obesity or a car accident. And they prohibited you, at least in California, I don't know if every state did, from even gathering at funerals. We couldn't go visit our loved ones in the hospital. And that was all government power being exerted, and the churches went along with it by far and wide. There were some pastors and churches that stood up to this, but generally speaking, a lot of the religious leaders went along with this thing. And I'm not questioning their salvation. I'm just showing you how easy this was. They didn't have to inject you with a microchip on your hand or forehead. It was just saying you can't do this without the approval of the government, and it worked. No actual mark was required on your hand or forehead, but we even saw far too many religious leaders bow to the power of the state. Many claimed that Jesus would have bowed to the state or taken a jab for the common good. Yeah. And Mr. Graham, your dad's rolling over in his grave with those statements, right? But while this passage might indicate an actual physical mark, it is more a portrayal of allegiance, just as the sealing of the 144,000 was a symbol of their allegiance to God and ownership by him. This mark is symbolic of an allegiance to the Antichrist and his government. Look around and see how many religious leaders who professed allegiance to God with their mouth showed where their true allegiance was by their action. I want to be clear here. I'm not saying that the people who went along with the government or took the jab are not Christians. Many were deceived. It will not be the case here. This is not going to be a case. You're not going to accidentally take the mark of the beast. I guarantee you. This is a willful choice. But I'm just bringing this up to show you just how easy it was. It didn't take some futuristic technology to make it happen. It was simply the government issued an order and people complied in the droves, right? And you weren't allowed, and if you actually questioned the order or questioned what was going on, you were ridiculed, right? Many people lost their jobs over this stuff. Now, verse 18 is one of the most debated verses in the entire book of a widespread disagreement on the identification and meaning of the number 666. The most common line of interpretation is that it's gematria. Gematria is that every letter has a numerical meaning, and that you can count up the numbers in the name, and it will add up to 666, right? And then the letters in the alphabet are substituted for numerals or numerical system derived from later Arabic mathematicians. Hence, each letter stood for a number. The problem is that no clear identification can be made linking 666 with any particular name. Attempts have been made to alter spellings and incorporate titles to try to make a multitude of names fit. But nothing conclusive has emerged on this. Most commonly, the number has been identified with Nero on the basis of the Hebrew transliteration of the title Nero Caesar. However, this flounders on the confusion concerning the exact Hebrew spelling of Caesar, and does not fit the fact that John's readers were largely Greek speaking, and Nero had many titles other than Caesar. Additionally, if John were using gematria, he would have alerted his readers to this by saying something like, the number in Hebrew or Greek is. And he uses the phrases in Hebrew or in Greek in Revelation 9:11 or in 16:16. So it's not like he never does it, but he didn't do it here, which kind of undermines the argument for gematria. Right? And attempts have been made unsuccessfully to identify a number with other Roman emperors or a combination of emperors. According to one study, and this I put in yellow for you, according to one study, over 100 names were proposed in Britain between 1560 and 1830. That's 100 different identifications of Antichrist. And I'll tell you right now, there's one that says it's Prince Charles. Okay, if you're not tired of all the wrong guesses yet, there's your latest wrong guess. Okay. And here, I'm going to quote you from a different source in Salmon on his historical introduction to study of the book of the New Testament, and see what he has to say here. Through any interpreter's creative ingenuity, the number can be worked out on the basis of Greek, Hebrew, or Latin to identify hundreds of possible ancient and modern candidates. There are so many proposals because it is easy to turn a name into a number, but complicated to deduce the right name from a number. Salmon formulated 3 rules which commentators have used for making any desired name equal 666. First, if the proper name by itself will not yield it, add a title. Secondly, if the sum cannot be found in Greek, try Hebrew or even Latin. Thirdly, do not be too particular about the spelling. We can't infer much from the fact that a key fits the lock if the lock to which almost any key will turn it. Okay, can you hear the sarcasm? It was pretty good on Salmon. I like that, right? Just, hey, if you don't like it in Greek, try Hebrew. And if you don't like Hebrew, try Latin. We'll put German in here later. And Beale is going to say all attempts to identify the number with a literal calculation of some individual's name encounter difficulty because of the metaphorical manner in which the language and the numbers are used in the book. If the number were intended to be identified with some ruler by means of such calculation, it would be a rare exception from the way numbers are employed elsewhere in the book, e.g., the 24 elders, the 7 seals, 144,000, 3.5 years, the 2 witnesses, 7 heads, 10 horns. There is no evidence of any other number in the book being used in such a way. Mic drop, Beale. Okay? Yeah, there is no evidence of it. This is fabricated. So that gets us through Revelation chapter 13, and we'll be in 14 on next time. But I just wanted to tell you this is all pre-recorded, so I can't be here to answer your questions right now, and I normally play a song, go to the chat, but I actually used the whole hour anyway. So with that, God willing, I'll be back here again next time, and may God bless you all. And here's my